approaches, could we do it different? Just like, could we perhaps change our angle a bit? And the question then is, how do we do that? Should we choose to do so? And I really want to start with this definition. Some of you are obviously familiar with it. It's a definition that we use widely in the Ethics Institute. Ethics is about what is good for the self, the other. The self being either an individual, a group, an organization, or even a country, and so could the other be. So if we take this definition, let's see what we're confronted with, to what extent it may influence this definition. Because we see widespread unethical behavior, and it seems to be on the increase. Unreasonable greed. Dion, I'm glad you used the words reasonable greed. The first time I used the words reasonable greed, someone said, but that sounds like a contradiction in terms like military intelligence. And, but, I think it's just sort of to put it out there, to say to people, hang on, as Gordon Gekko said, maybe the Wall Street, he said, greed is good. But I think many people think that. But is there perhaps a reasonable greed? When Dion referred to the future of corporate governance, and he referred to perhaps a company-based perspective, I was slightly despondent because I would have liked to see the word organization in there, reflecting many stakeholders, but the company was strongly rooted in how we think and do often. We see corruption, fraud, cronyism, nepotism, collusion, interpersonal abuse, etc. If you think about our vocabulary that we use, and I'm very glad to see that at this conference, I did a quick scan of the themes of the papers that will be presented. And obviously the theme is evolutive. And I think that is a really positive sign. But in our daily lives, and when we study it, and when we teach business ethics, or when we practice it, our vocabulary, we use words like bad, wrong, unjust, fighting, we fight corruption, or combat corruption, moral decay, transgressions, wrongdoing. This is part of our vocabulary, particularly those of practitioners, and also exposing and catching those who do wrong. Okay. And we sometimes forced to do that because organizations may be strictly compliance. They want to tick boxes and they want to send a message that we have a zero tolerance approach. How does this influence our definition? I think we ask questions about what undermines the good. We reflect on selfishness. And we ask questions about to what extent is the other being harmed, because at the basis of ethics is cause and harm. So if we're pursuing a balance between the self and the other, which is ideal, it may be that there's a distorted sense of a balance between self and other. In other words, the way we may be viewing the world is that that arrow it's not in the middle, but it's more to the left-hand side, more to the self. Is this how we think and do? And just to show you on the slide, are we cynical? Are we despondent sometimes about making an impact, making a difference? Pessimistic? And do we have sometimes learned our business? I'm just doing my job as an ethics practitioner, and I can't do much more than that. So, as an example, and how does it affect us? I think it is energy sapping because there's a negative energy sometimes involved in what we do. It gives us fatigue, mental fatigue, may cause depression. And the problem is we constantly send red signals about who we are, what we do, and what we want others not to do. The tendency is, and I'm putting that out there, that business ethics related thinking and discourse are premised on the dark side of human behavior. So continuous engagement with the dark side involvement, doesn't it transform into a gloomy narrative that we as editors don't like? And Has the dark side become the norm for what we think and do as organizations? Are we collectively then staring into the abyss as a default mode? What you see there may not be happening to us consciously, but explore and think back and reflect on your subconscious. Do you really believe in what you're doing? Do you believe that's making a difference? Or do you have some frustrations? And so it's often at a subconscious level. So what is the net effect? It does give us a bit of a rush, doesn't it? Because it gives us a sense of power. Let me tell you about the dark side of behavior. But also we project our attitudes without us realizing it. So if you look into something long enough, you could become that thing. You cannot change things without things also changing you. When you struggle against people or things, for reasons good or bad, these people or things will shape what you become. So what is our current view? Our basic assumption, again, perhaps subconsciously, is that organizational ethics is a problem to be solved. So how do we do this? In a structured way, identification of the problem, an analysis of the causes, and then analyzing possible solutions, and then action planning or treatment. So there are three challenges that I would like to end the first bit with. In the long term, this cannot be conducive for a sustainable state of objectivity in and credibility of the field of business ethics or organizational ethics. I'm an organizational ethicist, so that is my default mode. It cannot be good for the psyche of the scholars and practitioners and those stakeholders that we may affect. We could make, though, a concerted effort not to thrive in the dark side territory. So what then is required? And I'll take you to a quote that I got from a book by publication by Sakirka et al. Pervasive negativity needs to be balanced because positive and negative emotions experienced during ethical challenges can serve as levers for collective and individual ethical strength. That is the introduction. Just to put you in the picture in terms of the background, what prompted this research and what type of thinking informed the thinking that went into the project. So what is our research objective? The objective is to explore and perhaps create a new paradigm for how we think, do research, and apply organizational ethics. So it's a shift at a higher level. It's not just doing things bit by bit at a micro level. So this paradigm is based on the notion that organizational ethics should be approached in an enlightening, positive way as compared to the current paradigm, which is largely based on the dark side of human behavior. So what is the projected outcome? What is it that we'd like to achieve? I think it's the construction of a framework that could guide thinking and doing in the field of organizational ethics from a strongly positive mindset. Now, the word positive may be you may be thinking about that. I'll say more about that in a slide or two. So our research approach, then what we have decided to adopt, is the theoretic technologies of social construction of thought. It's not something one can really do through quantitative research. So we need to build something, and we need to construct our own social reality. Perhaps an alternate or a new, over time, social reality. The important thing here is that ethical behavior is about human behavior. And therefore, I thought of the field that I was brought up in, so to speak, psychology, more specifically organizational psychology. And I thought, why not use the phenomenon of and the school of thought of positive psychology as a foundation for thinking going forward, because we can take a lot from what they offer. Martin Seligman, seen as the single parent of the positive psychology school of thought, and it is nowadays well recognized as a school of thought. Martin Seligman, in his words, in our rush to do something about people in trouble, in our rush to do something about repairing damage, it never occurred to us to develop interventions to make people happier, positive interventions. And beyond something that you said also right at the end is, what type of society are we creating? Do we want to create? Positive psychology is a scientific study of what makes life most worth living. So the main focus in positive psychology is an emphasis on strengths instead of weaknesses, building the good in life instead of repairing the bad. It's about aspiring to a positive, uplifting, energizing end state where making a significant difference can be the norm. And there's a strong cognizance of human flourishing as opposed to suffering. So towards understanding positive organizational ethics. So the thinking has been as follows, that perhaps we could follow an approach of what we call positive deviance. So that is uncommon behavior that is norm-defined yet socially desirable. Almost like I think a whistleblower is a microcosm of being positively deviant. It's appreciative and inquiry-driven. It's innovation-inspired, and it is transformational. I think in the bigger scheme of things, a very important word, transformation. So what is positive business ethics then? Well, if we change our assumption that ethics is a challenge and solve, and perhaps consider this, business ethics is a mystery to be embraced. And it's about appreciating and valuing the best of what is, envisioning what might be, the society, again, type of society we want to build, obviously not the time. Dialoguing what should be. I think that's crucial. Dialoguing what should be, not enforcing in any way. So in other words, we need to send green signals. You remember the previous slide with the red signals? If we have power, influence, and will, and we do, we can exercise our will on the world. And we can determine and disseminate ideas and things that are morally praiseworthy, typically good works, and being counter or positively deviant. But we need to think of this in a bigger picture, a more holistic picture, and not just in day-to-day action, but also in terms of the way we think. Okay, so what has emerged from the research up to now? So I'm going to show you interventions 1 and 2 that we did. We conducted research via an appreciative inquiry session in person in April 2022 and virtual in April 2022, where we had a total of 30 participants in 2 groups. And it's really heartwarming to see many of those that participated in the room here today. So I'm just coming back to what you told me, okay, in terms of the new ideas. 16 South African participants in person and virtual. There were about 12 people. Okay, so almost 30 in total. So these are the frameworks that emerge. I'm just going to quickly show you. I'm not going to do these in detail. You can find it in my slides, but this is one particular one. It looks like that. It centers around the good and value, self and business and stakeholders and society and the environment on the other side. Now, the same group that produced this small group within the interview setting, within the research setting, converted that to this thing. So you can see it's also linked to the triangle definition, with ethics in terms of theory and practice, principles and values, And then business, measurement, values, reputation, trust, and then finally human flourishing, human values like dignity, care, empathy, compassion. With linking all these, context, dialogue, and transformation. So that was the first framework that was produced. And the second one, you see once again the triangle definition coming into the picture. It's about, once again, about value being created. We'll see it in the middle there. Flourishing, prosperity, humility, dignity. And interesting, the quote that the group came up with is that without ethics, there's no value proposition for organizations. Framework 3, once again, that we see a triangle, but this time slightly different. Eyes, muscle, and ear. Okay, with eyes being vision, discovering, visioning, imagining, and then muscle, enacted accountability of systems, and ear, transformative stakeholder management. And at the center of it, the heart being goodness. So that is what we aspire to in good life. And for society, for everyone to be good. The framework 4, I can only find this version of it, but you'll see 4 main themes on the sides: business, practice, research, and then other, particularly focusing on stakeholder relationship. Okay. So in terms of intervention 3, we conducted a focus group with an international audience, people from, and we had quite a few prominent business editors from around the world participating, very well known people. We had about 13 in the group. We did this on the 1st of October. Unfortunately, because it being such a wide audience and the time's precious, we had to do it. We could only do it in 2 hours. So with 14 international participants, let me quickly run through the key themes that emerged. There's a need to step away from current paradigm. We have to acknowledge the multidisciplinary nature of organizational ethics. And I remember Dion specifically raised this as a point. We also have to define this positive organizational ethics, and I'll get to that a bit later. And we have to ask the question, who are we as organizational ethicists? Currently, what we do is often based on the beauties of suspicion. So a humanist outcome is desirable, linking back to Vuuren, think about that. A way of thinking based on upliftment, positive organizational character, and an underlying virtue frame. Ethics needs to be a force for good, aspirations for a good life, and interface with strategy, because that is often where things go wrong. Ethical influence is better understood as a distributed and reciprocal practice. It is a compass to understand dynamics such as ethical excellence, thriving, flourishing, and what is ethically extraordinary. And it is life-giving. I would like to end with the words life-giving. You can see there's not much about the dark side that because it's really about thinking about things differently. Key insights, I think we need to, once again, dig deep and focus on finding the right name. There were questions raised about the word positive ethics, and the reason I use the word positive ethics initially is based on positive psychology, which is a recognized school of thought in that field. And I think a contender could be transformation organizational ethics. This also emerged from our research. And so obviously we need to define this concept, positive organizational ethics, base our framework perhaps on the triangle definition. There seems to be a movement towards that. And I think we need a dynamic framework that suggests movement and moving forward and sustainable development, and perhaps an upward spiral of virtuous circles. Okay, this does not mean though that we should ignore the dark side. That is, you can't say now, okay, let's forget about corruption, let's just focus on things being positive. Okay, it will always be there. It is there, that's a fact. But instead of spending our 90% of our thinking and doing time there, why don't we make it the other way around? Maybe 80-20. 80 positive, 20 doc. The next steps. So in 2023, we'll build a theoretical base with practical ability. We'll define the concept, identify key dimensions of this hypothetical framework that I was referring to, perhaps with inputs, contextual determinants, process and outcomes. We'll test back to the audience and back to our research participants. Then refine it, produce a final draft, and then disseminate, hopefully at the next Pan-African conference. But I think alongside that, we need continuous inquiry and reciprocal interaction with role players, postgraduate research, conferences, publications. And then obviously adjust the framework where necessary, because it won't be cast in stone. It is a developing, it's a work in progress over many years. This is the thinking, especially the paradigm shift, will not happen overnight. And so lastly, what do we do? Yeah, what could we do as, should you buy into what I was trying to sell to them? Is perhaps we could reflect on our current theory, our research, our vocabulary, the words we use, the language we use, and our discourse. How do we talk? What do we talk about? Okay. So perhaps just throwing this back at you, something to consider that you could reflect on. And I think for the time being, that's it. Perhaps ending with a quote: never confuse positivity and kindness for weakness. It doesn't mean we have to suddenly become weak, because we can find strength from the notion of transformational organizational ethics or positive organizational ethics. Thank you.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
Oh, let Professor Leon sit down. I think it's important that we get him back. So I'll get 1 and 2. You're good to go. So we'll begin up there.
Okay, who was first? Okay, please proceed, the gent at the back.
It's a close speaking. As I said, I'm an engineer, so my mind is wired in a specific way. And I had the privilege to read the abstract and gave some comments on it. And immediately my mind jumped to the mathematical concept of set theory, where human behavior is the overall set with which we are going to work. And then we have ethics and we have law. And my understanding of this whole practice area would then be the set of human behavior with ethics, which should be geared to minimize the whole set of unethical and unlawful behavior, which is on the outside of the set of ethics, which also include law, with bad law on the outside. And I thank the person that peer-reviewed my paper to bring it to my attention that we must distinguish between good law and bad law. So the thing that I appreciate in this research is the fact that there must be a change from 90% thinking of the portion of human behavior outside of ethics to behavior within ethics, and that the drive must be to minimize that area. And I would like to applaud the people that started this research idea in 2021. Prof. Leon, I think that is very worthwhile. The one thing that is interesting is that you say ethical behavior
If
equals.
someone says it's interesting, it's a very difficult question. Okay, thank you.
It's not a dark side question.
It's okay.
I actually want to compliment you.
And I think as an engineer and as operations manager, and also ex-director, it is important that we must understand that the drive from our ethicists must be to incorporate as much as possible of the full set of human behavior, minimizing the unlawful and inhumane behavior by focusing on, as your research indicate, we must look at this. I think in terms of what you said, you must change your vocabulary. One thing that I've experienced in the last 9 years is to try and define where law fits within ethics. And I made a definition of the law as the minimum level of ethics for a society to live in harmony.
Like a red traffic light law is just a suggestion.
Guys, I think red traffic lights for the suggestion. Speed limits might be a suggestion.
But I think the changing vocabulary and the way ethicists should think about themselves is that they are the custodians of all rules and all laws. And if I can have my way, I would like to see that there is a faculty of ethics at every university in the world. And there is a department of contract law and the department of family law and so forth. And then you have all your departments that you have and so forth. And I think we must change our minds, and I will call on all ethicists to start defining law as the minimum level of ethics. And the good laws are ethical, and the bad laws, which I will touch on in my paper, is things that we as ethicists, because everybody is an ethicist, everybody is acting. And in that sense, you are acting accordingly, or sometimes against your ethics and your morals, depending on greed factors and all the other factors that previous people discussed. But I would like to call on the ethicists to say that you must take hold of the whole environment of rules, because ethics are a priori defined in our businesses. We have a code of conduct, we have a code of ethics. We define it prior to when we have our disciplinary hearings. As a operations manager, I have disciplinary hearings, and what do? We apply the ethics that we define in our disciplinary codes. We apply by whatever means or standards we decide how we are going to make the ruling. So there's no question, it is just I want to report you that you say that you must take hold and control of the narrative and make sure that you say that law is part of ethics as far as it is ethical and good.
Thank you. Yes. Okay. I would like to add that I think one of the challenges we have is that in an organization, in organizational settings, we have a very, very, depending on the type of organization, but there's usually a very strong compliance focus. And so things, obviously, if there's a compliance approach, zero tolerance, and then it becomes very procedural and a technical type of investigation. And then ethics, doing what is right is often not factored in. And the question is, what do we want to achieve? And then say, okay, what type of compliance do we require also in terms of what we want to achieve? What do we want to become? And what type of society, or firstly organization and society, do we want to create?
I think 4 is very interesting in trying to push us towards specific society as
Okay, thanks. Yvonne, do I still have time left?
One from Lisa. Is there someone else?
There are many others. It's a philosophical question. Is there someone else? Okay.
Leon,
Yeah, thank you for the presentation and the work that I really have appreciation for the work that you have put into this. I'm just wondering now from a practical perspective and being an ethics practitioner, going into an organization tomorrow, doing the work that we do, or being the ethics officer,
Yes.
taking what you have now discussed, how do we, what would be our message if we go tomorrow into an organization?
Thank you.
Do we go values-based or what do we do?
Okay, no, it's not about being values-based. I think it's about ethics officers asking themselves, what is it that we want? And what is it that we want to achieve? And then say, okay, what do we need in the process? And then we could obviously, there'll be some compliance, there'll be good law. But, I think not just what is in our KPA, but what is it that we want to achieve? Not only in our organization, but even in a wider context, in a more global setting. What is it that we want to, what society do we want to create? And what is our role in that? And then work backwards and then say, okay, what 20% of laws do we need, but also how can we also do it a bit differently? So I think it's where we want to be. And then work backwards.
Prof, I want to give you a story before we go. Our grandma was watching the kids play, the grandchildren, and she could see the struggle running after the ball. And so she went and picked the ball and handed it over to the child and said in Swahili, this thing is really bothering you. You've been running after it all, but here you are. So some of these discussions, ladies and gentlemen, they can go on and on and on until we have a solution. And the solution is not getting the ball back to our hands, but thinking, research, and listening to conversations, trending issues, emerging issues within the industry, so that we can make informed decisions which will guide us. With that failed remarks, I would like to appreciate Prof. Thank you. Let's appreciate him. You're clapping. Thank you. I would request Brian to make an announcement and also present this to Prof.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you.